The early morning sun spilled soft golden light across the small town of Maplewood. The streets were quiet, and a thin layer of mist lingered above the sidewalks. Marcus, a tall man in his late 40s, walked slowly through the streets. His worn boots scuffed against the pavement, and his coat, faded and patched in many places, swayed with each step. Marcus had once served his country with pride, but now he carried the weight of years on the streets, his home taken away by circumstances beyond his control. Despite the hardships, Marcus walked with quiet dignity. His eyes, sharp and observant, scanned the streets as he moved. He had learned to notice small details, the way a neighbor smiled, the direction a car moved, the subtle signals of someone in trouble. Marcus had always been careful, cautious not to draw attention, but he also had a quiet strength that made people respect him when they got to know him. On this particular morning, Marcus's stomach growled louder than usual. He had skipped breakfast as he often did, hoping to find a warm meal at one of the diners that opened early. His steps led him to a small diner on Main Street called Sunnyside Cafe. The sign above the door swung gently in the breeze, the paint chipped but bright. The smell of fresh coffee and toasted bread drifted into the street, making Marcus's mouth water. As he pushed open the door, the bell above it jingled softly. The diner was modest, with checkered tablecloths and polished wooden chairs. The air smelled of coffee, fried eggs, and something sweet from the oven. Behind the counter, a woman in her 50s named Clara worked swiftly, serving breakfast to the early patrons. She glanced up and gave Marcus a warm smile. "Good morning, Marcus," she said kindly. "The usual?" Marcus nodded. "Yes, please, Clara, thank you." He moved to his favorite booth by the window. From there, he could see the street and the diner's entrance. He liked to watch people come and go. There was a comfort in being able to observe the world while staying safe in his little corner. As he settled into his seat, a pair of police officers entered the diner. Their uniforms were crisp and their badges gleamed. Marcus noticed them immediately. They did not glance at the other patrons as they walked toward the counter. Their eyes were fixed on him. Marcus kept his expression calm, sipping his coffee slowly. He had encountered prejudice before, though it had never been this obvious. He knew the officers could approach him at any moment, but he also knew he had the right to sit quietly and enjoy his meal. One officer, taller than the other, leaned slightly toward the counter and spoke to the clerk in a low voice. Marcus could hear fragments. "That man, he doesn't belong here." The words were barely disguised, but the tone carried suspicion and judgment. Clara, noticing the officer's focus on Marcus, tensed slightly but kept her smile. She had served Marcus many times and knew him as a polite, gentle man.
"He's a regular," she said softly, her voice firm but quiet.
"He's just having his breakfast." The taller officer's eyes narrowed. "We'll see about that," he muttered under his breath. Marcus set down his cup and rested his hands on the table. He could feel the tension building in the diner. The other patrons, a mix of workers, travelers, and a few students, sensed the unease but remained silent. Some stole glances at Marcus, unsure whether to intervene or stay out of trouble. Marcus felt their concern but kept his calm demeanor. He had learned that panic or anger could make situations worse. The officers approached his booth, their boots echoing against the floor. Marcus looked up at them slowly, meeting their gaze without fear. "Good morning, sir," the taller officer said, his tone polite but laced with suspicion. "Do you live around here?" Marcus shook his head. "No, I don't," he replied simply. His voice was steady, carrying no hint of aggression. The officer glanced at his partner and then back at Marcus. "Do you have any identification on you?" he asked. Marcus reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small wallet. He handed it to the officer. The officer took it and examined the contents. There was an old photo of Marcus in uniform, a few cards, and his identification. The officer's expression changed slightly when he saw the veteran photo, but it did not soften his tone. "You're a veteran," he said. "Why are you out here without a home?" Marcus shrugged. "Life took some turns," he said simply. "I'm just trying to get by." The officer grunted and handed back the wallet. "We'll be keeping an eye on you," he said. With that, the officers moved back toward the counter, continuing their whispered conversation. Marcus returned to his breakfast, trying to focus on the warm eggs and toast before him. But the tension lingered like a heavy fog. He could feel the eyes of the officers on him every few moments, and he knew that any small misstep could escalate the situation. As he ate, Marcus noticed a young man sitting at another table watching the scene unfold. The young man, Leo, had a kind face and seemed uncomfortable with the officer's behavior. He kept shifting in his seat, unsure whether to speak up. Marcus caught his gaze and offered a small, reassuring nod. Leo nodded back, a silent understanding passing between them. Clara moved between the tables, carrying plates of food. She kept her eyes on the officers, her hands steady as she served the other patrons. Marcus admired her quiet courage. She could have ignored the situation entirely, but she did not. She was standing by him in her own way. The officers finally returned to the door. Marcus looked up, expecting them to leave, but instead they lingered, scanning the diner one more time before stepping outside. The tension in the air did not disappear. Marcus knew this was only the beginning. He finished his breakfast slowly, savoring each bite. Even in the face of suspicion and prejudice, Marcus found comfort in the simple things. A warm meal, a kind smile, and the knowledge that he had survived worse challenges in his life. After paying Clara, Marcus stood and adjusted his coat. He stepped outside into the morning air, letting the sun warm his face. The town looked peaceful, but Marcus knew appearances could be deceiving. He walked down the street with quiet determination, aware that the officers might return, but also aware that he would not be intimidated. As he passed a small park, he saw children playing on the swings, their laughter ringing through the crisp air. Marcus paused for a moment, watching them, and allowed himself a small smile. The world could be harsh, but moments like this reminded him that kindness and hope still existed. He continued walking, his mind already planning the day ahead. He would find a safe place to rest later, maybe visit the library to warm up and read, and he would check on a few friends who were also struggling. Marcus's life was not easy, but he carried it with dignity, courage, and quiet resilience. The streets of Maplewood might be unforgiving at times, and the people in authority might misunderstand him. But Marcus knew who he was, a veteran, a survivor, a man who would not let fear or prejudice define him. And in the small moments, like a quiet breakfast at a diner, Marcus found the strength to keep moving forward one step at a time, in a world that often seemed determined to challenge him. Marcus had barely walked 10 steps from the diner when he noticed the officers lingering near the entrance. Their presence was a shadow over the morning, and he could feel their eyes following him, even as he moved down the street. He tightened the straps of his backpack and continued walking with steady, deliberate steps. Maplewood was a small town where everyone seemed to notice everything, and Marcus knew that being a black man without a home made him stand out in ways that could attract unnecessary attention. Despite the officers' watchful eyes, Marcus held his head high. He had learned long ago that fear could make someone weak, but calmness and dignity could command respect. Still, he could sense the discomfort of those around him. A few early risers on the street hurried past, pretending not to notice the tension while some glanced curiously at the unfolding scene. Marcus ignored them. He turned a corner and entered a narrow alley that led to the back of the local library. It was one of his favorite quiet spots where he could sit, read, and plan his day without interruption. The alley was lined with old brick buildings, the walls covered in faded murals and small tags of graffiti, remnants of a town that had stories of its own. Marcus reached a bench hidden behind a row of trash bins, sat down, and took out a small notebook from his coat. He liked to write down memories sometimes, little notes about his life or thoughts that helped him process the days. As he wrote, he became aware of footsteps approaching. At first, he thought it might be another pedestrian, but when he looked up, he saw the same 2 officers turning into the alley. Their expressions were a mixture of curiosity and suspicion, as if they were trying to find justification for watching him. "Marcus," the taller officer called out. His voice was loud enough to echo slightly off the walls. "We need to talk to you." Marcus closed his notebook slowly and looked up, meeting their gaze. He remained calm. "About what?" he asked evenly. The officer hesitated, then said, "Just some questions. You've been in town and we need to make sure everything is fine." Marcus nodded. "I understand. But I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm just walking." The officer stepped closer, a gesture meant to intimidate. Marcus didn't flinch. He had faced worse situations during his service and in the years after. His calmness was like a shield unbroken by intimidation. "I think you should come with us," the officer said, his tone attempting authority. "No, Marcus replied simply. "I have done nothing illegal. I am free to walk." The officers exchanged glances, their irritation growing. Marcus could sense that their pride and prejudice were fueling the tension. He stayed seated, his eyes steady on theirs, refusing to rise in fear. Meanwhile, back at the diner, a few patrons had noticed the officers following Marcus into the alley. Leo, the young man who had been watching earlier, grew concerned. He knew Marcus was a veteran, a man who had given much to serve his country, and seeing him treated this way stirred something inside him. He wanted to act but wasn't sure how. Clara, the diner owner, had seen the officers leave the cafe. She wiped her hands on a towel, her face showing worry. She had known Marcus for years, had served him countless breakfasts, and had seen him treat everyone with kindness. The sight of him being harassed made her heart ache. She considered going outside to intervene, but worried that confronting officers could escalate the situation. Still, she could not sit silently while someone she cared about faced injustice. Outside, Marcus remained seated on the bench. The taller officer tried to press him further. "Are you hiding something?" he asked, his voice edged with suspicion. Marcus shook his head. "No, I'm not hiding anything. I am just living my life." The officer's partner, a younger man, looked uneasy. He shifted from one foot to the other, glancing at his partner as if unsure how far to push. Marcus noticed this hesitation and stayed calm. Sometimes patience could be a stronger weapon than anger. As the tension lingered, a passerby, an older woman named Mrs. Howard, stopped near the alley. She had seen enough in her life to recognize injustice when she saw it. "Officers," she said in a firm voice, "that man is not doing anything wrong. Leave him be." The officers glanced at her, surprised by the interruption. Marcus looked at Mrs. Howard and gave a small, grateful nod. Her courage, though simple, reminded him that not everyone would stay silent in the face of unfairness. The taller officer scowled. "We are just making sure everything is fine," he said. "Everything is fine," Mrs. Howard replied sharply. "He's a veteran. He's a good man. If you want to help, maybe help the people in this town who actually need it instead of harassing someone who has served our country." The officers hesitated, their pride wounded by her words. Marcus remained seated, his calmness intact, showing strength through restraint rather than confrontation. At that moment, Leo, who had followed at a distance, took out his phone. He dialed a number quickly and spoke in low tones explaining the situation. Marcus noticed him, but his attention remained on the officers. He trusted that Leo would do what he could. While Marcus waited, he thought about the life he had lived. He had been trained to stay calm under pressure, to assess situations carefully, and to protect those who could not protect themselves. He had not expected to use those skills against people sworn to serve the community, but life was unpredictable. The officers, sensing the increasing presence of bystanders, decided to step back slightly. Their earlier confidence began to waver. Marcus's calm, dignified demeanor, combined with the watchful eyes of Mrs. Howard and the quiet support of Leo, made them reconsider their approach. Marcus stood up slowly, adjusting his coat. "I have nothing more to say to you," he said evenly. "I hope you understand your responsibilities and act fairly." With that, he began walking away back toward the main street. The officers stayed in the alley for a moment longer, exchanging quiet words before finally leaving, though their eyes still lingered on him as he moved. Marcus did not look back. He focused on the path ahead, each step deliberate and steady. Leo stayed nearby, keeping watch as Marcus moved down the street. "Are you okay?" he asked once Marcus had reached a safe distance. Marcus smiled faintly. "I am fine. Thank you for your concern. That matters more than you know." Leo nodded. "People should not treat you like that. You've done so much for this country, and yet they forget." Marcus shook his head. "It happens. I have faced worse. What matters is how we respond. Calmness, dignity, and patience can sometimes speak louder than anger." As they walked together for a short while, Marcus explained some of his experiences from his time in service. Leo listened intently, absorbing every word. There was a quiet admiration in his eyes, and Marcus appreciated the attention not for praise, but for genuine understanding. Meanwhile, back at the diner, Clara noticed that other patrons were talking quietly among themselves. The incident had caught their attention, and though most of them were not brave enough to intervene directly, the conversation sparked awareness. Change often began with small moments like these, and Clara felt hope that the community could grow more compassionate and just. Marcus eventually reached a nearby park bench in the sunlight, a place where he often rested before continuing his day. He sat down, taking a deep breath, feeling the warmth on his face. Even in the midst of tension, moments like these reminded him that the world had beauty worth noticing. Leo stayed with him a while, ensuring that Marcus felt safe. Then, with a nod of understanding, Leo left to continue his day, promising to check back later. Marcus remained, thinking about what had just occurred. The officers had not succeeded in intimidating him, and the small acts of courage from Mrs. Howard and Leo reminded him that he was not alone. As the day progressed, Marcus planned his next steps carefully. He would visit a friend who could help him find shelter for the night, maybe stop by a local library to read and warm up, and he would continue to navigate life with dignity and strength. The officer's presence had reminded him of the challenges he still faced, but he also recognized the quiet allies around him who could help bring justice and compassion to the world around him. Marcus sat quietly on the park bench, feeling the warmth of the sun on his face. The tension from the morning lingered, but he refused to let it cloud his mind. He had lived through challenges before, and this was just another one he could face with calm and dignity. He watched as the townspeople went about their day, children laughing and chasing each other, a dog running after a bouncing ball. Even in the midst of his struggles, Marcus found comfort in observing life's small joys. Nearby, Leo watched from a distance, worried about the officers who had followed Marcus earlier. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts. One name stood out: Detective Simmons, a respected officer in a neighboring town known for fairness and integrity. Leo knew that if anyone could intervene in a tense situation without escalating it, it would be Detective Simmons. He dialed the number quickly, his heart beating faster than usual. As the phone rang, Marcus noticed Leo speaking softly, his face serious. He understood what Leo was doing and nodded slightly in approval. Leo explained the situation clearly, describing the officer's harassment and Marcus's calm, dignified response. Detective Simmons listened carefully on the other end, his voice calm but firm. "I will handle it," he said. "Tell Marcus to stay where he is. I'll be there soon." Marcus felt a small spark of relief. Help was on the way and he could continue his day safely. But he also knew that the officers might grow impatient. He stayed alert, keeping an eye on the street and nearby alleyways, prepared for anything. While waiting, Marcus reflected on how often life could test a person's patience. He had faced hardships before, during his service, during his time on the streets, but moments like this were different. The challenge was not physical but moral and social. It was about standing up against unfairness without letting anger or fear take control. He had learned that dignity and calmness were sometimes more powerful than confrontation. Across the street, the two officers from the diner had returned. They stood near a corner shop, speaking quietly, glancing frequently toward Marcus. They had not expected a phone call or intervention, and their expressions showed annoyance mixed with uncertainty. They had assumed Marcus would be intimidated, but his calm demeanor had already disrupted their expectations. Marcus noticed them, but did not react. Instead, he focused on the bench, on the sunlight warming his face, on the simple joys around him. He had learned long ago that showing fear or anger could give power to those who sought to harm or intimidate. Calmness was his shield, patience his armor. Leo stayed close, pacing lightly but always within sight of Marcus. He checked his phone periodically, knowing that Detective Simmons would arrive soon. The presence of someone looking out for him brought Marcus quiet reassurance. He understood that allies could make a difference even in small ways, and that hope often began with a single act of courage. After what seemed like an eternity, a sleek car pulled up near the park. A tall man in a neat suit and a badge clipped to his belt stepped out. It was Detective Simmons, calm and confident, yet commanding respect with his presence. Marcus stood as the detective approached, nodding respectfully. "Marcus," Detective Simmons said warmly. "I hear you've had a rough morning." Marcus nodded. "Yes, sir. Some officers were watching me without reason. I tried to stay calm, but it has been stressful." Detective Simmons smiled slightly. "You did exactly what was right. Calm and dignified. That's important. Now let's make sure they understand the same." Together, Marcus, Leo, and Detective Simmons walked toward the main street. The officers noticed the detective's arrival and froze for a moment. They had not expected an authority figure from outside the town to intervene. Detective Simmons's calm but firm demeanor immediately commanded attention. "Good morning, officers," Detective Simmons said, his voice carrying authority without aggression. "I understand there has been some concern regarding this gentleman. Can you tell me what the issue is?" The taller officer hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. He looked at his partner, who shrugged, equally unsure how to respond. "This man, we were just—" the taller officer began but stopped. Words failed him in the face of Detective Simmons's steady gaze. Detective Simmons raised a hand gently. "Let me remind you of your duty. Every citizen deserves respect, fairness, and the benefit of the doubt. No one should be harassed or intimidated based on appearance or circumstance. Do you understand that?" The officers nodded reluctantly, their earlier confidence replaced by discomfort. Marcus stood silently, letting Detective Simmons address the situation. He trusted that this intervention would be fair and that his dignity would be acknowledged. Detective Simmons turned to Marcus. "You have nothing to worry about. I will ensure that this situation is handled properly. You have every right to go about your day without interference." Marcus allowed himself a small, relieved smile. "Thank you, sir. That means a lot." The detective then addressed the officers again. "I expect you to respect the rights of every individual in this town. If complaints are made, there will be consequences for misconduct. Is that clear?" "Yes, sir," the taller officer replied quietly, avoiding Marcus's gaze. With that, the officers stepped back, finally leaving the area. Their departure was slow, but it was clear that they understood they could not act with impunity while under scrutiny. Marcus exhaled, feeling a weight lifted from his shoulders. The tension that had followed him since the diner began to dissipate. Leo clapped the detective on the shoulder lightly. "Thank you for coming so quickly. We weren't sure what to do." Detective Simmons smiled. "It's always important to act when someone is being treated unfairly. Courage doesn't always mean confrontation. Sometimes it means using the right channels to protect someone's rights." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "I have learned that calmness and dignity are my best tools. But having allies makes all the difference. Thank you for standing with me," the detective nodded. "And thank you for showing strength and patience. Not everyone can remain calm in difficult situations. You have set an example for everyone here." As the morning wore on, Marcus decided to continue his walk. He felt lighter, knowing that justice and compassion had intervened in a tense situation. Leo stayed nearby, offering support but also giving Marcus space to regain his normal rhythm. Along the street, townspeople who had witnessed parts of the morning watched with curiosity and a sense of respect. Some whispered to each other about what they had seen, recognizing that standing up against unfair treatment required courage not just from Marcus, but from those willing to intervene in the right way. Marcus paused near a small fountain in the center of town. Water sparkled in the sunlight, and he took a deep breath, letting the gentle sound soothe him. Moments like these reminded him that even in a world with challenges and prejudice, hope and fairness could still be found. Leo approached, holding 2 cups of coffee he had purchased from a nearby cafe. "Here," he said. "You deserve a break." Marcus accepted the cup with gratitude. "Thank you. It's nice to enjoy something simple after a stressful morning." They sat on a nearby bench, sipping coffee in silence for a few minutes. Marcus reflected on how small acts of kindness and intervention could change the course of events. A phone call, a willing ally, and calm courage had turned a difficult situation into one that reinforced dignity and justice. Detective Simmons had already moved on to his next responsibility, but his presence remained a reminder to Marcus that fairness could prevail when people acted with integrity. Marcus felt a renewed sense of determination. He would continue to navigate life with patience and courage, knowing that even in challenging circumstances, support could arrive in unexpected ways. By mid-morning, Marcus stood, ready to continue his day. The officers were gone, the tension dissipated, and the town seemed brighter. Leo gave him a reassuring nod. "You've handled this well," he said. Marcus smiled. "Sometimes strength is quiet, and sometimes it comes from others. Today I've had both." As Marcus walked toward his next destination, He knew that life on the streets would continue to have its difficulties, but he also knew that dignity, calmness, and allies who cared could make a meaningful difference. And that knowledge gave him hope. Marcus had spent the rest of the morning walking quietly through Maplewood, taking in the warmth of the sun and the calm rhythm of the town. The earlier tension with the officers had faded, replaced by a quiet confidence. He knew that his dignity had been respected, and for now that was enough. But as he turned toward the diner to check on Clara and the other patrons, he sensed that the day was not yet over. Leo walked alongside him, alert and ready. The young man had stayed close ever since the phone call to Detective Simmons. Marcus appreciated the company, even though he preferred to handle his challenges with quiet resilience. It was not often that someone stayed by his side, genuinely caring about his well-being, and he valued that support. As they approached the diner, a small crowd had begun to gather outside. Some were curious townspeople who had noticed the morning's events, while others were friends of Marcus who had heard about what happened. Whispers filled the air, concern, questions, and some admiration for the veteran who had faced harassment with calm strength. Suddenly, the officers appeared again, returning to the diner as if they had unfinished business. Their expressions were tight, a mixture of frustration and irritation. They had not expected Marcus to remain calm, and they certainly had not anticipated the arrival of allies who had called for accountability. Detective Simmons arrived shortly afterward, his presence calm but commanding attention. He moved quickly to the front of the diner, positioning himself between Marcus and the officers. Marcus felt a surge of relief. With Simmons there, he knew the situation would not escalate unfairly. "Good morning again, officers," Simmons said firmly, his voice steady. "I understand that you have returned. Can you explain why?" The taller officer shifted uncomfortably. We wanted to make sure there was no problem," he stammered. Detective Simmons' eyes were sharp. "Your actions earlier were unnecessary. Harassing a citizen, especially a veteran, without cause is unacceptable. You are here to protect and serve, not intimidate. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir," the officer replied quietly, avoiding eye contact. Detective Simmons turned to Marcus. "Marcus, I want you to feel safe. I will ensure this ends peacefully and correctly. You have nothing to fear from these officers today." Marcus nodded, grateful. "Thank you, sir. I have only tried to remain calm and respectful." The presence of the detective drew attention from the growing crowd. Patrons of the diner peeked through windows, and bystanders on the street paused to watch. Marcus's quiet strength and Simmons's calm authority created a powerful scene, one that subtly reminded everyone that fairness and justice could prevail even in difficult situations. The officers exchanged glances. Their usual confidence had vanished, replaced by the realization that they were being held accountable. Simmons's calm authority made it clear that misconduct would not be tolerated. Detective Simmons addressed the officers one more time. "I will not tolerate harassment, intimidation, or discrimination. Your duty is to protect all citizens equally. I am giving you a chance to leave peacefully and reflect on your actions. Are we clear?" The officers nodded again, muttering assent. One of them tried to speak but stopped, realizing that any further words might worsen the situation. Marcus stepped forward slightly, his calm presence unwavering. "I have done nothing wrong. I have only lived my life with dignity. I hope that in the future fairness and understanding guide your actions." The taller officer hesitated, then nodded. "Understood," he said softly, a hint of humility in his voice. With that, the officers began to retreat, walking back toward their vehicles. The crowd outside the diner let out quiet murmurs of relief and admiration. Marcus exhaled slowly, feeling a weight lift from the morning's tension. The confrontation had ended peacefully, thanks to patience, calmness, and the right intervention. Leo turned to Marcus. "You handled that well," he said. "I was worried it might get worse." Marcus smiled faintly. "Calmness is the key, and having allies makes a difference. Today proved that." Detective Simmons addressed the gathered townspeople. "This morning's events are a reminder that respect, fairness, and dignity are essential in our community. Every citizen deserves to be treated with decency. Let us all remember that." The crowd nodded, some applauding softly. Marcus felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Even though the day had begun with tension and fear, it was ending with a message of hope and justice. As the officers drove away, Marcus noticed Clara approaching from the diner entrance. Her face was filled with concern, quickly changing to relief as she saw that Marcus was safe. "Marcus, are you all right?" she asked, her voice tinged with emotion. "Yes, Clara, I am fine," he replied warmly. "Thanks to the help of friends and allies." Clara's eyes softened. "I'm glad you're okay. That was so unfair, seeing them treat you like that. But I'm proud of you for staying calm." Marcus nodded. "Dignity and patience are stronger than anger. Today proved it." Meanwhile, townspeople began to approach Marcus, offering words of support and encouragement. Some spoke of wanting to ensure he had a safe place to stay. Others offered small gifts or food. Marcus accepted their kindness with gratitude, appreciating the sense of community and care. Detective Simmons stayed for a few moments longer, speaking with the officers briefly to ensure they understood their responsibilities. Then, with a nod to Marcus and Leo, he left, confident that the situation had been resolved appropriately. Marcus and Leo turned to enter the diner. Inside, the atmosphere had shifted. Patrons were more attentive, aware of the morning's events, and there was a quiet respect in the air. Clara greeted Marcus with a plate of food, fresh and warm, her gesture one of genuine care. As Marcus ate, he reflected on the morning's challenges and victories. He had faced harassment, suspicion, and unfair treatment, yet he had emerged with his dignity intact. More importantly, he had allies who had stood with him, ensuring that justice and fairness prevailed. Leo joined him, sharing in the meal and conversation. They spoke quietly about life, fairness, and the importance of standing up for what is right. Marcus felt encouraged, knowing that even in small towns, change was possible when people acted with courage and integrity. The diner's atmosphere grew lively as patrons began to interact, sharing stories and laughter. The events of the morning had sparked awareness and empathy, reminding everyone present that kindness and understanding were powerful forces. Marcus felt a quiet pride, not in himself alone, but in the way the community had begun to respond. After finishing his meal, Marcus stood and thanked Clara. "Thank you for your kindness," he said. "It means more than you know," Clara smiled warmly. "It's my pleasure, Marcus. Everyone deserves respect, and you've earned mine long ago." Marcus and Leo stepped outside, feeling the warmth of the afternoon sun. The street seemed brighter, the world a little more hopeful. Even though challenges remained, Marcus knew that dignity, patience, and allies could overcome fear and unfairness. As they walked through Maplewood, Marcus spotted small gestures of kindness, neighbors greeting each other, children helping one another, and friends offering support. These moments reminded him that fairness and compassion could ripple through a community, touching lives in meaningful ways. Marcus paused near a small fountain, watching the sunlight dance across the water. He thought about the morning's events and the lessons they carried. Strength was not only about physical endurance, it was about character, patience, and the courage to stand up for what is right. Allies mattered, and small acts of kindness could make a significant difference. Leo joined him quietly, offering a warm smile. "You've handled everything with so much grace," he said. Marcus nodded. "It wasn't just me. It was everyone who stood with me. Everyone who chose fairness and courage over fear and prejudice. Today reminds me that even in difficult times, hope exists." They walked together down the street, the afternoon sunlight casting long shadows behind them. The officers were gone. The tension dissipated, and Maplewood seemed alive with the promise of fairness and compassion. Marcus felt a renewed sense of determination. Life on the streets was still challenging, but with dignity, calmness, and allies, he could face whatever came next. By the time they reached a quiet corner of town, Marcus knew that the day's events had changed something, not just for him but for the community. The confrontation had been resolved peacefully, but it had also sent a message: fairness, respect, and courage were stronger than fear and prejudice. As Marcus prepared to continue his day, he felt a sense of hope. Change was possible, and even small acts of courage could ripple outward, creating a better world. With Leo by his side, and the support of allies like Detective Simmons and Clara, Marcus felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, confident that dignity and justice would guide his path. The afternoon sun began to settle toward the horizon, casting a warm golden glow over Maplewood. The streets were quieter now, filled mostly with residents returning from work or school. Marcus walked slowly, taking in the familiar sights, the small shops, the children playing near the fountain, and the occasional neighbor greeting him with a nod.
Today felt different.
The tension of the morning had passed, replaced by a quiet sense of accomplishment and hope. As Marcus approached the diner, he noticed Clara sweeping the front steps. She looked up and waved warmly. Marcus smiled and waved back. Inside, the diner buzzed softly with conversation. Patrons who had witnessed the morning's events shared stories and reflections, discussing fairness, courage, and community. It was as though the town itself had shifted slightly, becoming more aware, more thoughtful, more compassionate. Marcus stepped inside and was greeted with quiet nods and smiles. Clara approached with a plate of fresh food. "Marcus," she said warmly, "I thought you might like something to eat before the evening comes." Marcus accepted it gratefully. "Thank you, Clara. You've been so kind today. It means more than words can say." Clara shook her head gently. "It's the least I could do. Everyone deserves respect. You've reminded us of that." As Marcus ate, he reflected on the events of the day. The morning had been tense, with officers following him and questioning his presence. But through patience, dignity, and the help of allies like Leo and Detective Simmons, he had remained calm and composed. Today had shown him that even in difficult situations, fairness could prevail. Leo, sitting across from him, leaned forward. "You've been through so much, Marcus. I hope you know that people really see your strength and courage." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "I've learned that strength is not just about facing challenges alone. It's about patience, calmness, and knowing when to seek help. Today reminded me that we are not truly alone if we have allies." The diner's atmosphere remained warm and inviting. Patrons quietly expressed admiration for Marcus, offering words of encouragement and small gestures of support. One elderly man approached Marcus with a small envelope. "I wanted to give you this," he said kindly. "It's not much, but I hope it helps." Marcus accepted the envelope with gratitude, touched by the thoughtfulness of strangers. "Thank you," he said softly. "Every act of kindness makes a difference." Meanwhile, Leo's phone rang. It was a friend from a local shelter who had heard about the morning's events. They offered assistance, temporary housing, access to meals, and even help finding a more permanent place to live. Marcus's heart lifted. The support of the community was tangible now, not just words, but real help that could change his life. "Marcus," Leo said with a smile, "you've inspired people today. They want to help. They see you and they care." Marcus nodded, feeling a deep sense of hope. Sometimes all it takes is patience and courage, and a reminder that fairness and kindness can make a real difference. After finishing his meal, Marcus stood and stepped outside with Leo. The sky was painted with soft pink and orange hues, and the evening air was cool and gentle. Marcus felt lighter, as though the day's challenges had been lifted from his shoulders. They walked to the small park where Marcus often rested, the same place where he had spent part of the morning. Children were still playing, their laughter filling the air with joy. Marcus paused by the fountain, watching the water sparkle in the last light of day. It reminded him that even in difficult times, beauty and hope existed. Leo glanced at him. "What will you do next?" he asked. Marcus smiled faintly. "I will take the help offered and plan for the future. I want to find stability and maybe even give back to the community that stood with me today." Leo nodded. "I know you will. People like you, strong, patient, and kind, can make a big difference. You've already inspired many today." As the evening settled in, Marcus walked to the local shelter. The staff welcomed him warmly, offering a bed, food, and guidance. Marcus felt a sense of relief and gratitude. Finally, after many nights on the streets, he had a safe place to rest. He could eat without fear, sleep without worry, and plan for a future with a little more certainty. That night, as Marcus lay on the small but comfortable bed, he thought about the day. From the tense morning at the diner, the officer's unwarranted suspicion, the support of Mrs. Howard and Leo, to the arrival of Detective Simmons and the community's growing awareness, the day had been a journey of justice, patience, and hope. He realized that courage came in many forms, not just in bold confrontations, but in calm persistence, in standing tall under unfair scrutiny, and in allowing others to help. He had faced prejudice without losing his dignity, and in doing so he had inspired others to act with fairness and empathy. The next morning, Marcus woke feeling refreshed and optimistic. He stepped outside the shelter and breathed in the crisp morning air. The world felt brighter. People passed by with smiles and nods, recognizing the man who had stood with dignity and inspired change. Marcus decided to visit the diner again, to thank Clara and see the townspeople who had supported him. As he approached, he noticed a small group gathered outside, some offering greetings, others curious to see him. It was a moment of connection, a reminder that even small towns could foster compassion and change. Clara came out to greet him. "Marcus, good morning. I hope you slept well." "I did, Clara, thank you," he replied warmly. "Thanks to you and everyone who helped today, I feel supported and safe." Clara smiled. "You've reminded everyone of something important. Courage and patience matter, and so does kindness. The town has seen that today." Marcus looked around, noticing the smiles, the nods, the small gestures of goodwill. He felt a renewed sense of purpose. Today had been about more than just standing up to unfairness. It had been about creating hope, inspiring action, and building a stronger, more compassionate community. Later that day, Marcus visited friends in the town who had offered support. He shared stories, exchanged smiles, and even helped organize a small gathering at the library, where townspeople could discuss fairness, kindness, and community responsibility. Marcus knew that change was a process, but he felt encouraged by the small steps that had begun. By evening, Marcus returned to the shelter, grateful for the warmth and safety it offered. He reflected on how quickly life could shift, from tension and fear to hope and support. The phone call earlier had been a turning point, showing that seeking help and standing with dignity could create real change. As he prepared to rest, Marcus thought about the future. He had a place to sleep, meals to eat, allies who cared, and a town slowly learning the value of fairness and respect. Life would still have challenges, but for the first time in a long time, Marcus felt truly hopeful. He closed his eyes, letting the sounds of the evening, the distant laughter of children, the rustle of leaves, the gentle hum of the town, soothe him. Marcus knew that tomorrow was another day, another chance to live with dignity, patience, and hope, and with that thought he drifted into a peaceful sleep, ready to face the future with courage and strength.